Why do I make you take a test? What's the point of taking a test? I don't care if you know stuff, but why make you take a test? Say it louder. Understanding is a really difficult cognitive concept to try and prove. Yeah. I can do that by asking questions in here. If I ask questions and nobody says anything and I get crickets back, you got nothing. Yeah.
Is it to familiarize ourselves with it, like not understand it, but just kind of like see it, get an idea of it?
Okay, so the main reason that's to understand where you are at. What is my job up here? To teach you stuff. How do I know you know how to do stuff? To give you feedback on what you know. So David, I just remember reading yours yesterday. Your discussion post. Okay, so my online class, it's really easy to know if you did anything because I can see if you did anything. Yeah, and so in the online class, it's fun because I have students watch a video and then relate it to the book and their personal experience, and people still don't understand the social media section, but I'll work on that. Anyway, but so what I try to do is I read every single thing that every one of my stupid 61 students writes. Trust me, it seems like a great idea on the front side, but boy, ugh. Anyway, so because I read every single thing, I make a comment on every single thing that someone writes. Everything. I actually skipped 2 people at the beginning, and I went back and made comments on them because I hit enter before I made the comment. Sorry. But I can't do that in this setting because, so what do you know about this? And wait. And what do you know about this? And wait. It takes me about 2 hours to go through one assignment in Canvas to go grade that stuff, at least. Especially when my kids are bugging me to play Monopoly. That's what was this weekend. Anyway. I crushed them. Okay. My son crushed us the first game. I crushed them the second game. 2 days.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, but so what I try to, by giving you an assessment, by giving you a test, it puts up these random questions of just useless content that you have to know. The weird thing is the first test that you take on Thursday is going to seem really hard. If I give you the same questions by the second half of the class, how is it?
Easier.
Super easy. Super easy. You're like, duh. Because it's just getting exposed to the material is the part that really is important. And so that's why we're going through everything once this right now. Then we're going to go through everything again, but with more detail. So for example, on Tuesday next week, we'll be talking about the visual systems and how they work. And you need to understand all the stuff we're going to review today so you can understand how we see. So it kind of builds on itself. That's why the first test is so important. Your giant stack of flashcards is important for this part. Okay, so we have 2 different views of the brain right here. 2 different views of the brain. What is this view right here? What cut is that? Or not cut, but what view is that? Say it louder. It's a sagittal cut. Okay? It's right down the middle of the brain. Okay? Right down the center. Is this the surface of the cortex or is it a cut? The tricky question. The surface of the cortex starts deep inside and goes all the way to the top and all the way around and then all the way back. I believe do you guys have that top view? This one. I'm not sure if you have the bottom view, but the bottom view is a little different than the top view. So I'm just going to show you this. This is what's so cool about the brain. The cortex wraps all the way around. The cortex wraps all the way around. It starts deep in the center, comes all the way up, and then all the way around, and even tucks in underneath at the bottom. Why do humans have such big cortexes? Not storage. Why do we have so much cortex? Space, hold on. Totally worth it. Oops, missed. That's a GIF, that's why I missed. Okay, here is your standard manatee cortex. Let's look at this compared to a human cortex. First of all, how much does a manatee typically weigh? Somebody in here has been to SeaWorld as a kid and watched a manatee float upside down. Do you remember? I miss the manatees. They're so cool. You could go in there on a hot day, no one was ever watching them, and they just float upside down. And they look at you. What are they called? Sea cows. Okay, so I can put this in perspective. Our brain's about 15 centimeters long, so this brain's about a third of the size of our brain. How many wrinkles does it have? 2. One this way and one going back that way. Dos. A lot, cabbage. There's a motorboat. Oh, cabbage. No! Okay, most of them get hit by boats. That's how they die, because pollution and getting hit by boats, because they don't get out of the way. Because did they really plan and organize their behavior very well? Nah. Okay, they don't have much surface area in their cortex. Because they don't have surface area in their cortex, there's not a lot of connections in their cortex. Without a lot of connections, they don't learn very well. It's very hard to train the manatees. They don't have favorite trainers at SeaWorld. They're not at SeaWorld anymore. They went back to Florida. But they don't have favorite trainers. Dolphins, they have favorite trainers. Yes, and dolphins will mess with you. Hold on. Oh, we got sick kid in carpool. We're okay. Okay, not my kid. So these guys don't have much memory. We can test their memory and find out they don't have very good memory. Humans, however, live in a very strange place. Where do humans live? El Cajon? No. Where do we live? What kind of space do we live in? Well, no, it's not that crowded. We're up in the mountains skiing. It wasn't very crowded at all. Our space that we live in is extremely complicated. Because humans really haven't evolved in the last 10,000 years or so. We pretty much have the same brain. However, what has evolved? Our ideas, the concepts that keep flowing through our brains have evolved. So the same thumbs that made chippy tools are the same thumbs that make these computers. It's like we haven't changed. But what's happened is every generation, the young people seem to get smarter. It's called the Flynn effect. And they get smarter because we're reprogramming this thing, we're adding software, not changing the hardware. That's what makes humans really cool. We just keep upping the software, just software upgrades, patches. And what's great about this is that this allows us, as a species, to really kick butts on species that have hardwired thoughts. Dogs, cats, rats, birds, except for crows, mostly have hardwired thoughts. When the world changes, what happens to a lot of species? They die because their hardwired thoughts, the manatees are dying because they don't do well with warmer oceans. They don't do well with, manatees are going further and further out into the ocean. Is that good for something without any natural defenses? No. Sharks and killer whales like, dude, that thing can't even swim. Chomp. How come the killer whales are surviving quite well? They have more cortex. They come up with plans. They figure things out. They talk to each other somehow. Hey, dude, I'm going to go up to the beach, throw a few seals to you. Okay, got it. Swim, launch himself onto the beach, throwing seals over his shoulder. The other ones are quick, catching them, and he flops back into the water.
It's actually how dolphins eat in Savannah. They actually kick the fish onto land, and then they go and get it.
Yeah.
They're all scarred and stuff.
Yeah, and they have a really good time. They figured it out.
The killer whales at SeaWorld talk to the dolphins from a pool away.
And they're taunting them, going, "Come over here. We got candy."
And they teach the other killer whales how to talk to them too.
Because they're smart. It's kind of sad that we have them trapped in pens, but they're plotting our demise. Don't worry about
They
it.
have to live.
Yeah.
They can't live anywhere else.
Yeah, I know, because they've been bred there. And, yeah. We'll let them free. The humpback whale that they had there, they put a radio tracker on it. Tell anybody how long it lived? It starved to death once it got out in the ocean. Well, if it's not by mom, does it know how to eat? Turns out no. Okay. Is that you buzzing or me buzzing?
It's me buzzing.
Okay, good. I'm like, but my volume's on. Okay. Waiting for my tax guy's supposed to call. I really don't want to do my taxes. I'm kind of putting it off. The tax table's changed. Yeah, moving on. So now, okay, but so the one of the main reasons we have such a complicated brain is because our brains are so flexible. Not as far as their structure is flexible, but the way that our brains connect information is extremely flexible. 86 billion neurons, each one releasing chemicals, each one connecting to up to 10,000 others. Anywhere they connect, they can form a connection, a neural connection. Anywhere they cross, what causes them to form a new connection is synchrony. When two brain waves are in synchrony, two brain waves firing at the same time, those two brain cells will become connected eventually. If they're firing at completely different ways or different rates, they don't become connected. So when we talk about these general structures of the brain, they're not hardwired to, I'm going to rewire that. Each part of the brain does what it's supposed to do. Every single part of the brain does what it's supposed to do. However, how they're connected inside is what makes our thoughts work, not the actual parts themselves. So for example, if I take an arrow and poke it right back here in your head, David, be quiet, what will happen to you? Sorry, David, I just wanted to... Go ahead. Yeah, good. Good. This is where you see. What lobe is it? Okay, so your occipital lobe, back here, the right side of your occipital lobe sees what side of the world? The left side of the world. The left side of the world comes in, goes across through the thalamus, and comes out on this side of your brain. Anything, if I look straight ahead and close this eye and move my hand here, this, and open them back up, this is only going to this hemisphere. Okay? The same thing as I close this eye and move my hand over there, open my eyes up. This is only going to this hemisphere if I look straight ahead. But as soon as I move something, what's going to happen? What's happening with my eyes? Why do they follow things that are moving? Because your eyes can't help it. Like when you're talking to someone, they've got something stuck in their teeth. Your attention is constantly focusing your eyes so that you're seeing things in both hemispheres, on both sides. Okay, I do have kale in my lunch, so I would be careful. Okay, so the occipital lobe is where you see. What do you actually see in the occipital lobe? Little lights. Shiny dots. You see lines. You see lines. We'll go through this in annoying detail next week. But you see lines. Your occipital lobe just sees lines. So what other areas are on the occipital lobe on the handout? Look, the next page with the words. There's ones with words on it. The last page.
Parental lobe?
So I think this should have the primary visual cortex and color areas. Is that on there? Is that? There's a list. Where's the list of vocabulary that's with that? I just want to make sure that I have all the parts. Broca's area is frontal lobe. Primary. Okay. Cool. So there's a Lamena. There's lamina. Can you find that on there? How do you spell that?
Lamina or E, depending.
Yeah, lamina, lamini, more plural, singular. This is a fancy word for layers. When we take apart, if you were to take one of these pictures and zoom it in really fine detail, you can actually see it pretty well right here. Let me zoom this in with obnoxious detail. Okay? When I zoom this in with lots of detail, what do you notice about this? Can you hit the lights on? Oh, there you go. What do you notice? Can you see the different layers in here? Yeah, here there's 1, 2, 3 layers there. If we were to zoom this in back in even more detail, whoa, that went super small. Okay, computer, relax. There we go. So if we start zooming in the cortex, every single area of the cortex is layered. There are layers and groups of cells. These layers and groups of cells do different things. They all have the same purpose, but they do different ideas of the same thing. So I'll give you just a really simple idea of the occipital lobe to understand what the different layers are. So there's also these things called columns. So I'm going to draw a layer of the occipital lobe. Okay? And so in a particular column, the cells do the same thing. As they move down the layers, it gets more complex. Okay, so I'm just give you a simple answer for this, or a simple thing, and we'll talk about this as we get on. But you kind of need to understand the layers and columns. So if I were to stimulate, if I use the electric fork and stimulate that particular cell in that particular layer of that particular column, you see a shooting light going that direction. Ding! I bit my lip. Ow! I bit my lip really bad yesterday. You know, like when you bit your lip and then you keep chomping on the same spot? A little bit. Okay. So anyway, so if I activate that particular cell, you see a little zing, a light going off at a particular angle. If I activate this particular cell, I see a line starting from a particular point. As opposed to just a shooting star, I actually see a ray. If I activate this one, I see a line with 2 ends on it. If I activate this one, I see a line with 2 ends on it moving down that direction. In other words, if I were to, the line is here, and all of a sudden the line starts moving this way, that's activating that particular layer. And as I get down further and further into the layers, the behavior of the cell becomes more and more complex. So what's crazy about this is that every single column responds to a particular angle. Every single column responds to light of a different angle. As you get further down the column, down the layers, same column, every down the layer, it becomes more and more detailed. We're going to explain this a lot more when we talk about visual systems, but I want you to kind of see how complicated our visual system is. Just on the front side, each layer is the same function but more complicated. So in your auditory cortex, you also have layers. Can you hear the difference between different people's voices? How? Yeah, layers. Like you can hear pure pitch versus garbly pitch. You can hear a difference between a saxophone and a trumpet and a clarinet. If you're, my dad was a violinist in his life before he passed away. He could listen to a type of violin and tell you what kind of violin it was because of the characteristics that particular violin had. I have a CD in there somewhere in my office about somebody playing Isaac Perlman or whatever, some famous violinist, playing all these really fancy, famous violins. And to me, it all sounds the same because I hate the violin. But it's interesting because the music was written for certain types of violins. And if you play like Bach on a violin that Bach would have used, it sounds right to musicians. Moving on. Okay. So the same thing happens to do with all the other parts of your brain. There's also layers. Some behaviors like vision and smell are extremely complicated and have tremendous amount of layers. Movement, however, not very complicated. Very few layers. Because how do you move? We did the motor cortex, right? Kind of? Did we do the frontal? Did we do the surface at all yet? Okay, so where's the motor cortex? Right there. Don't say that. What lobe is it in? What lobe is it in? Come on. I'm coloring in the primary motor cortex. Nope. Try again. Yay. It's okay. The primary motor cortex is in the frontal lobe. Anything having to do with movement and behavior, the answer is frontal lobe. Someone shouted out Broca's area earlier. Broca's area is the production of language. So it's the behavior of your thoughts. Ooh. That's frontal lobe. Broca's area is right here. It's actually kind of a strange story, but Broca was a neurologist, and he met somebody that had a massive stroke. And after the guy died, the way they studied neurology in the 1800s was wait for an industrial accident, wait for someone to study them while they're still alive, then wait for them to die, and then look at their brain. So Broca had a patient, the only word he could say was ta, ta, ta. That's the only word he could say. He said it for everything. And so when he died, they noticed that there was a huge hole in his brain where the stroke was right here. So he said, oh, that's where language is. It's not exactly where language is. Broca's area is where, this is where your accent comes from. It's fun. I have a wonderful student, Thora. People probably know her in here. She's so much fun. She speaks with a very heavy Middle Eastern accent. Very, very heavy. When she writes, if she writes something quick like an email, I can hear Thora. But if she rewrites something, she's super good at writing English, but it takes her 2 or 3 edits to make it so it doesn't sound Arabic. What's the difference between Arabic and English? No, not that much. Verb tenses. It's a huge difference. So when you hear someone speak with the Broca's area, they use the wrong verb tenses. It's fun. Or you get to hear them speak language next door. Okay? And so if you're using the behavior of speaking one language with another language, how come it comes out clunky? Someone's bilingual in here. More than one people is bilingual in here. Me too, but being raised in Vermont, we learned French, which is very useless in California. Until you go to Canada, and then it's still pretty useless because almost everybody speaks English. Unless you're in Montreal, then they refuse to speak English because they're too cool. We are France. No, you're not. You're Montreal. You're Canadian, eh? No. Okay. If you're Canadian, that's funny. Otherwise, it's just stupid. Okay. So if you speak more than one language, can you think in more than one language? Yes. How do you think in more than one language? I remember when I was taking German in college, I dreamt in German. I woke up and I was like, whoa, I've been studying too much. I need to go outside. And it's crazy when you start dreaming in another language, because what are you dreaming in? Thoughts? It is. Do you see things in your dream? Or do you activate your occipital lobe in your dream? Are you actually seeing stuff in your dream? No, you're activating your occipital lobe. When you activate your occipital lobe, what happens to your consciousness? It's active in your visual consciousness. So your visual consciousness, the visual lobes become activated when you're dreaming, and as a result, do you talk in your dream? Yeah, you talk in your sleep too, but those don't happen simultaneously. No, usually it's not the same. It's different stages of sleep. So, so when you dream, when you're seeing, what you're actually doing is activating the occipital lobe, and the information is coming forward into the temporal lobe. Into a temporal lobe. We'll go through the different left and right side here in a few minutes. But, okay, so let's go through the primary motor cortex first, and then we'll get back to this. The primary motor cortex, what does it control? How? Impulses, twitching. Every single neuron in your primary motor cortex twitches a muscle. It flexes a muscle. If I want a full contraction, what do I do? Not twitch all the muscles, continue twitching one muscle. If I continue twitching one muscle, then that forms a contraction. If I stop twitching, it relaxes. So I learned how to snowboard on Saturday. Awesome, really fun. I really like snowboarding. I never thought I'd like it, but I've been a skier my whole life, but I bought one on Craigslist, and to my daughter's annoyance, I said, I'm gonna go shred the gnar. She goes, Dad, you can't say that. I'm like, I have a snowboard, I can say shred the gnar. Okay, so the first one or two runs down, what was wrong with my motor cortex? I didn't know which muscles to twitch. Didn't know what to do. I've watched lots of people snowboard. I've helped my daughter when she was learning how to snowboard. I watched a few snowboarding lessons that my daughter and my kids were doing. So I'm like, okay, I don't need those stinking lessons. Let me save the $150 and I'm just gonna go for it. By the time I made it down the first run, I could do toe turns and heel turns, and I was getting better. And so by the end of the second day, I wouldn't say shredding, but I could go down the double blacks without hurting myself. So, but you really have to pay attention when you're snowboarding, because you lean the wrong way, bam, and you're on the ground. It's really fun. Okay, so, but I'm not like great, but I can survive. So the primary motor cortex is just twitching. Is the premotor cortex on here, on your list? Yeah.
So when I have one of my episodes, does that thing go crazy?
We'll get to a seizure in a few seconds.
Okay.
But yes. Is premotor cortex on here? No. Okay, so prefrontal, okay, that's another one of the frontal lobes. Okay, so the prefrontal cortex, I'm going to draw this with magical rainbow. Yeah, magical rainbow is really important. So why is the orbital prefrontal cortex so important? What does it do? It doesn't, well, it starts developing around 9 months. Because at 9 months of age, a little baby can start organizing and planning behavior based on input from the rest of the cortex. But it doesn't do it very well. It just only plans things based on one observation. However, as you get older, all the neurons in your brain feed to the prefrontal cortex. Every single neuron in your brain feeds to the prefrontal cortex. Because this is your consciousness and this is your choice. Now, I would say consciousness not as far as being awake or asleep, But this is your awareness of your plans. This is where your personality is. If I remove the prefrontal cortex, what happens to you? You don't think ahead. You react, but you don't think ahead. What's fun, this is why I think it's teaching a 15-year-old how to drive is relatively stupid. Well, this morning, my daughter has to drive everywhere we go now because she's getting close to crunch time and she needs to just have more time behind the wheel before we let her off on her own. My wife was like, let's go buy a car this weekend. I'm like, no! Okay, so that robbing bank thing, I really just don't want to do so we can buy a car. Okay, so she's driving down the street, the van's beeping and is obviously unhappy because our van cares about us and beeps at everything. And I go, the parking brake's on. She says, no, it isn't. I don't know. I think it's a 15-year-old thing that I'm stupid, I'm old, I'm wrong. Well, the light that says brake is on, the van's not moving very well, and it's beeping. Well, it's not the brake. Couldn't be the brake. She takes it off, it goes clunk. Boom! Oh, yeah, that was it. I don't think it works on one side anyway, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, but I think it only works on the passenger side. So, but it's funny because how come she can't, when she just backs up, you really can't feel the parking brake? But as soon as you put the gas on to go forward, do you know that you have the parking brake on? Most of the time, if you have any experience driving. Because as soon as you feel a subtle resistance on the car, you should do a quick check. Anytime there's a strange noise in your auditory cortex, does it make you change what you're thinking? Or change your planning? Should. Anyway, so this, teaching your kids what sounds the car should make versus shouldn't make is something that's really important. I'm drawing right here in green the auditory cortex. Which lobe is that in? Not midbrain. That's not a lobe. Temporal lobe. Okay, the temporal lobe. So the temporal lobe has the auditory cortex in it. What's really strange is that when people are thinking, when you are thinking, guess what you're activating? The auditory cortex. If I look at a schizophrenic's brain, if I have an EEG on it, if there's temporal lobe activity, the person is likely having an auditory hallucination. So if the person's schizophrenic and I'm listening to their temporal lobes, and all of a sudden their temporal lobes send a little bit of extra activity, I can say, oh, that person just had a hallucination. Because activity in the temporal lobe causes sounds. Sounds. So, anybody ever had the ringing in their ears? Yeah. It's a very specific frequency. Turn your music down, or you're in a world of problems. My good friend had, Tom, took medicine for his sleep apnea, and it caused tinnitus. Tinnitus. No, it's called not tinnitus. Tinnitus. Anyway, which is because tinnitus is. I got schooled that it was tinnitus, not tinnitus. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. That's what happens when you have a British instructor. You call it the duodenum, and never mind. Yeah, aluminium and stupid things. Anyway, sorry. But the tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on how you read, I don't read well. But what that is that's a cell in your brain firing because it's not getting feedback from your ear. So what you hear inside your ear, we'll go through this 2 weeks from now, but inside your ear, you hear all the different frequencies. When the neurons fire, it activates a frequency. So your brain's missing some frequencies. And so because she was born with some bones missing in her ears, or got sick and got the bones missing in your ears. Sorry, forgot that. Okay, William in my stats course was born without the bones in his ears. So he has a speaker on his head. Yeah, cochlear implants. Really cool. Okay? So if the bones aren't working in your ears can't send frequencies. So what happens to your auditory cortex? Well, it could decrease in size. And that's why you have Uber hearing aids in. Yeah, do they magnify the sound, or they actually put pressure on the membranes? So it takes the sound and makes it bigger, so when it hits the new little plastic bones they put in her ears, then she can hear frequencies, but it's not perfect. She can hear me because she's also watching my mouth move better. But when you talk, what does it sound like? And the reason is because if there's not enough frequency, so when I'm talking and my mouth's moving, that is going to the occipital lobe, which is sending information to the temporal lobe so that you can actually hear what you're looking at. I can't hear people as well when it's darker because I can't see their mouth move. Does that happen to you too? Hit the lights back on that. Okay. So, and it's interesting. It's like, and when I used to not wear my glasses, can you hit both lights back on? Thank you. When I used to not wear my glasses, I couldn't pay attention as well. Okay. Why couldn't I pay attention as well if I couldn't see? It's harder for me to focus mentally and visually. Whoa. So if you have prescription glasses, wear them. Yeah. Maybe. Well, okay, so then you go to the ocular therapy folks. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Hilliard, which I think is kind of a crock, but teaches kids they do visual therapy. And he thinks he can cure everything from ADHD to autism to dyslexia by teaching people how to better hand-eye coordination. Tis a bit. Most of the research on it is very fluffy as far as science goes. But at the same time, does vision therapy help a lot of people? Yeah, my daughter was really bad. We went to the vision therapy because my wife read something about ocular therapy helping. So we went and did it for a couple months. And my daughter's volleyball skills got so much better because it helps with hand-eye coordination. So that really made her a much better volleyball player. Didn't change her dyslexia at all. And I talked to an ocular therapist at a volleyball tournament for like 2 hours. And she thought it was a crock too, but people are selling it because people want to buy it. It's about money, yeah. But at the same time, it does help that person become successful in other things, but not necessarily making them less dyslexic or less autistic. It just makes them able to catch a ball. But if you learn to catch a ball, is it more fun to go play with your friends? So all of a sudden, there are other relationships that go in there that it's not just directly. So if you learn to actually pay attention, wait a second, you're learning to pay attention. Oh.
So people being expressed, is that primary motor cortex?
Sort of. Okay, so let's get back. Because the primary motor cortex is just a muscle twitch. We talked about the basal ganglia before. What does the basal ganglia down inside do? The caudate, putamen, and globus pallidus? This is a little bit further forward, so you just see the ends of them. Wait, these are what color cells? Gray matter. So these are, they're cell bodies. Terrible handwriting, sorry. So the dark cell bodies inside the basal ganglia, inside the brain. They filter messages. Remember we talked about it. What kind of things do they filter out? Biscuit. Happy birthday. Hedgehog. I played that video, right? I'm just being weird. I didn't play. I swear I played Tourette's Hero in here.
I've seen it in other.
May 15th through June 15th, it's Tourette Syndrome Awareness Month, but as you or we can control. Just Tom, welcome to BK Live.
Hi. Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thank
Biscuit.
you for coming.
Cat, Biscuit.
So it's your big Brick House debut
Yes,
tonight and
yeah,
tomorrow.
Biscuit.
We're
First
super
time.
excited.
First time showing backstage in Biscuitland in New York, and really excited to be here at Brook and in Brooklyn. Biscuit, Cat.
Thank you.
That's great. Since our viewers are already
Ta-da.
hearing it,
Biscuit.
you repeat it. Can you explain biscuit? The producers
Biscuit.
brought out some biscuits, and they want
Biscuit,
you to explain.
hedgehog, Biscuit. Well, Biscuit is one of my regular vocal tics. Biscuit. So I say it hundreds and hundreds of times a day. Biscuit, Biscuit. Biscuit in the UK, Biscuit means cookie. Hedgehog, Biscuit. But it's really exciting to see a different type of biscuit for the first time. Hedgehog, Biscuit. But anything I've ever known has the potential to become a tic. Biscuit. So, and why certain words stick around is a mystery. Biscuit. So I have no idea. Biscuit. Why Biscuit out of everything else? But Hedgehog and Hedgehog too. Cats.
So then when I go, hedgehog, that's why. Not just me. But, so that's a basal ganglia problem right there. That's her basal ganglia. What's happening with her? It's activating stuff that shouldn't be activated at that particular second, at that particular time. So what's happening is the cell bodies filter what? Biscuits and hedgehogs. Cats! Why does she keep saying cats? Well, okay, so you have to understand the full context of where she is. She loves the theater. But as a kid with Tourette's, you're sitting in the audience. What is everybody telling you? Shh, stop it. Shh, stop it. So she said, well, the only place that she can be in the theater is on the stage. So she made up this whole thing, Tourette's Hero, which is a whole show about people with Tourette's and disabilities to show, look, yes, we're funny. It's okay to laugh at the stupid things that we do because we can't control it, but you have to realize that when they shout racial slurs at you, it's not purposely shouting racial slurs, it's just biscuit, hedgehog. And you got to do that. Why is all the movements? What do you notice about the movements? Wait, say what you said?
Oh, it's paired with the word.
So the motor programs come out, biscuit just keeps coming out all the time. And it's as if it's like a sneeze, and we talked about sneezing in here, remember that? Okay, but what also they're not just like a nice slow movement. It's a sequence of twitches. They're motor programs called ballistic movements. Why do you think she's in a wheelchair?
Her legs probably.
Safety, because she can't just stand because the twitches, her whole body's moving by activating these twitches. There's a really great TED Talk with her where she actually gets very emotional because at this point in her life, I forget what year that was. Did it say the year on it? (2016). The last time she did the TED Talk, she's having seizures now as a result of her Tourette's. So by activating the motor programs, it causes too much activation, which debilitates the rest of the brain, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay, so the basal ganglia is underneath the motor cortex, and it's activating these motor programs. A motor program is a series of muscle twitches. So like when I first had to learn how to snowboard, there's basically you kind of slide backwards leaning back. And that's how you first learn how to just kind of feel what the board feels like. If you lean forward, the board, and you just fall flat on your face, which is highly entertaining and recommended for everybody. My forearms are really sore. Both forearms are super sore from just putting my hands down. I wore wrist guards because I'm not stupid. My daughter wasn't the first time. She snowboarded and broke her wrist. Anyway, so, moron. They're uncomfortable. I don't want to wear them. Good luck with that. Okay. Yes, they are very uncomfortable. I will attest to that, but I wore them. But the second thing is that you have to, once you figure out how to balance, you stop thinking about how to balance, and then you think about the next thing. Where's the balancing come in? Once you practice balancing, then you try the next thing, which is, no tricks. That's 2-3 years from now. Yeah, then you actually practice, once you practice sideways, you practice going straight. and then you realize that you don't know what to do when you're going straight, and then you fall down. Then you figure out, oh, go straight, turn sideways. Then you add the two motor programs together. Then once you get, my left leg started cramping up because I kept turning the same way. My poor left leg is like, you're really out of shape, fatso. I'm like, shut up, left leg. I see why snowboarders sit down a lot. It's really hard. Anyway, so after I figured that out, then I activated another motor program, which is the toe turn. And because I surf goofy foot, it's just like making a bottom turn at Tourmaline, which I'd done 1,000 times. I'm like, this is fun. So then I started shredding the nar. And then I started figuring it out. So the more you start adjusting these motor programs, they become less effort. Yeah.
I know you said surfing. It's like one motor program similar to another. So like surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding. Could you kind of like, if you're good at one?
Yeah, so the problem is if you're like the reason why I got a snowboard was because the snow conditions are amazing right now. I mean, the snow is perfect. It's light, it's fluffy, it's not grabby, it's not icy, it's just like surfing. So if you're snowboarding in soft snow, it's exactly the same motor programs as surfing. I'm not the greatest surfer. I'm not like shredding the gnarly waves dude, but I'm a longboarder. My happiness. Okay? But it's the same motor program. It's the same way to turn. Same way you balance, the same way you shift your body. But it just hurts when you fall down on the snow more than on the ice, but on the ocean, but whatever. So I can adapt it. Now, if I go again in spring break and it's icier, are my motor programs going to transition as much? No. So I'll have to adjust the motor program, but that's the key part. What does the basal ganglia do? It activates the motor programs and helps filter out unwanted programs. So when the motor, if I want it, like near the end of the day, we're coming down a couple of these really fun runs, and I'm coming down into the little, we call it the salmon nets at the bottom, where they have nets across the, before the lifts, so people don't just go plowing into the people in the lifts. And I'm coming down, and this little kid comes zooming in front of me. Well, if I weigh a lot, and if I clobber into someone, it's going to murder them. So, but I was able to turn quickly and go around them because I was able to activate the motor program and not just plow into them. And that's what's the problem is a lot of people will start going fast because it is kind of fun to go fast. But if you don't have the motor programs and how to turn, what happens? Well, you plow into people. And that's a problem with a lot of young, at least little people skiing are fun because they just go straight down the hill. Zing! They have no care in the world for anything. Yeah, they just hit the ground and go, and they get up and their knees are still attached and their shoulders are still attached. When you're 48 and you crash like that, you're in the hospital. You've got knees sticking one direction. Oh. Anyway, so when we look at this, when we start looking at this whole thing, in order to actually do anything, just to think about doing anything, you get feedback from the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe feeds into the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe feeds into the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex gives you the why. You can't really see that. The why you need to twitch your muscles. The why you need to twitch your muscles causes it to activate a particular motor program. Once the motor program is activated, the basal ganglia filters out the unwanted little muscle movements, which then sends it down to the, what's the dark substance inside here called? The substantia nigra. The substantia nigra then activates the muscles coming down the spine. What's this part on the side? Cerebellum. The cerebellum. This part down here is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is all about timing. Talk about layers. Okay? The layers, the lamina inside the cerebellum, you can actually see how intricate they are.
People can be flexible for a number of reasons.
Yes, is what you're getting to the right point. So the cerebellum is all about timing. Yeah. It's part of the reticular formation. So if you were a neuroscientist 30 years ago, it was a part of the basal ganglia. But now we know that the reticular formation is separate. Picture is as part of the same pathway, descending pathway, motor program, motor cortex series of twitches. Basal ganglia activates motor programs that go along with that. A good example is, Jasmine, can you throw this at me? Okay? Yeah, I don't care. Okay, so how do I catch it? Oh, I missed it. She caught it, I didn't. You're trying again. Okay, throw it harder. Okay, that's too easy. Okay, but so if, yeah, if it's coming in easy and straight, that was a nice spiral, by the way. Okay, how come it's so much easier to activate and catch? Well, it's not so much more time, but it's a very predictable motor program in which to attach. But if it's going all cattywampus, like backwards spinning, okay, missed. Okay, now give me a hard one. Ninja skills. Missed. Okay, I got a finger on it. Ah, spider. Okay. Okay, I like spiders. That's not unannounced. It's a daddy long legs. It's fine. Okay. So, but when she threw it hard, even though I could barely see it, I still got a finger on it because Little League training. It's more that, so my timing is not perfect because I'm not a very good athlete. I always tell people I'm a great second place athlete, never first place. Like my snowboarding, I look very awkward. I'm able to do it, and I'm able to go faster but it's not pretty. It's ugly. But what the fun part about this idea of the cerebellum is the cerebellum starts taking feedback from what? What does it time? Well, a lot doesn't work in this class. What's coming up the spinal cord at the same time? Through the ventral tegmental pathway. Sensations. So your movements are coming out, your body sensations are coming back. Your visual sensations are going through the superior colliculi. Visual sensations are meeting in the superior colliculi. Colliculi are then coordinating what you see with what your hands are moving. What your cerebellum is timing what you're feeling with how your body's moving. That's what's so fun right now because my hip flexors and some strange muscles inside my groin area are very sore. So every time I was driving yesterday, I had the cruise control on a lot yesterday, had to take my foot off of the floor and move it over to the brake or the gas for the cruise control. It's like, ow! Okay, I'm good. Ow! I'm good. So why is it hard to move when you're sore? Well, it's not the lactic acid buildup. That's just the reason of the soreness. But why is it harder to move when you're sore? Because the feedback tells you to slow down in order to move. And that's what's fun, is once you start moving around a little bit, it's fine. Like, I'm fine now, but when I got out of the car, when I drove here, I'm like, okay, here we go. And it's fun. I can't wait to live tomorrow. Just get my joints moving again. But the idea of the timing is the cerebellum is organizing these motor programs. So what's actually being sent out is pretty simple. What's actually being sent out of your brain is pretty simple messages. Flex this muscle, flex that muscle, flex this muscle, flex that muscle. But how do we get nice fluid movement? Wait till chapter 6. Okay, because that's all chapter 6 is about. It's exactly how we move. Okay, let's see. We got occipital lobe, we got temporal lobe. Okay, parietal lobe. What's a parietal lobe? It's right here. I'm drawing the post-central gyrus. What does the word gyrus mean? You can't see the red at all. Now, sulcus means crease. Always remember, sulcus sucks in. Okay? So the sulcus is a crease, a gyrus, jut. The post-central gyrus is also called the called the somatosensory cortex. The postcentral gyrus, which is colored in red, is called the somatosensory cortex. Every neuron in the postcentral gyrus has a corresponding dermatome. We'll talk about these dermatomes later in the semester when we talk about body sensations, after we talk about vision and sense and smell. So, for example, your face, let me go put this up here. This is a picture of your sensory homunculus. Hey, Wikipedia. How's that creepy at all? So, here's your esophagus. So when you swallow that thing that's too hot, because it's too hot to keep in your mouth, so I know I'll swallow it. That's smart. Why can't we just go do that and spit it out? So you're going to swallow it. Anyway, so when you swallow it and it feels like it's still right here burning a hole in your... It's not. But what happens is that the nerves inside your esophagus are slow nerves. They're not fast nerves. This morning, I was eating steel-cut oats. I'm trying to start eating oatmeal again in the morning because my blood sugar's been under control for about 1.5 years now without any issues. So I really like oatmeal in the morning. It's really good for you, especially if you work out, because it takes forever to digest and you slowly burn it off. Highly recommend it. Anyway, so I had a piece of oatmeal and it got stuck, what felt like right behind my sinus back here. Was it actually stuck there? No, like when you have a tickle in the back of your throat. Sorry. You're feeling it now. It's actually, the nerve may have been poked just once. Boink. But that neuron is a very slow neuron. So it goes, hey. I was going to do the sloth guy, but I won't because I don't have time. Okay, so once that neuron starts firing, it stays firing. So once you feel that pressure in your esophagus from swallowing something either scratchy or swallowing something too hot, it stays firing for a while. And this part of your brain says something's in your throat, something's in your throat, something's in your throat. It's right next to your tongue in your brain. And as you go through, is this exactly how your body is shaped? No? Yes. So I see myself. What's interesting is that it's lined up based on the way the nerves come into your brain, not based on the way your body's actually laid out. Your left somatosensory cortex senses the right side of your body. The right somatosensory cortex senses the left side of your body. It's really kind of crazy. Where do you think you have more neurons? In your hand or in your feet? Your hand. Way more neurons in your hand. It's much, much more cortex in your hand. This is for my intro class, the Boo Creepy Foot Doctor. Notice what's right next to the toes. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Okay, I like this little guy. This is pretty cool. Well, that's very creepy now that I'm looking at it closer. I'll drive away from that. Okay. But anybody knows who's been caught in a zipper? That's accurate. Okay. Ooh. Rice and beans. Right. Okay. Movie. Something got married. Okay. So. Sorry, I gotta get the scene out of my head. Okay, I'm fine. So, as you look at the somatosensory cortex, why would it be right next to the motor cortex? That's the cerebellum, is what's filtering the timing of reacting to what you feel. But in order for you to actually move a part of your body, what do you need to know? Where it is to start the movement. So next time you're falling asleep, take one foot and turn it to the side and relax. And then try to think about which way your foot is turned. Without any movement, what happens? You gotta wait till you're falling asleep and not moving any muscles. As soon as you stop moving, what happens to the way your body feels in space? Detached. There's things called a sensory deprivation chamber. Everybody hear these things? There's a place in Claremont you can go to them. It's full of, depending on how expensive it is, the cheaper ones are full of salt water because it's cheaper to have salt water. The really expensive ones, it's mineral oil. So the mineral oil is the cooler one because mineral oil has the same density as your skin. So if you take mineral oil and put it in your hand, you can't feel it because it's the same density as your skin. When you're in the water, you can feel the water moving around. If you're in really salty water, however, they make the salt water the same density as your skin. You just float there and you can't feel the water unless you move. So if you lay there, if it's a nice warm temperature, not too hot, not too cold, and you just lay there in it and you float in it, you lose the ability to feel where your body is in space. Some people freak out by this, and if you put headphones in with the block out sound or earplugs, and then you put goggles on, you completely lose all your sensory information. Yeah. Some people don't like it. Well, my buddy Nick does it because he has a super crazy stressful job. He's a mortgage banker person. He's the one that caused the B-side problem in 2008. That was Nick. But he made enough money off of that they own 2 houses in Bay Park and 2 or 3 houses in Claremont now. Bastards. Anyway, moving on. The La Jolla Tennis Club people. Moving on. All right, we're going to buy a used car for my daughter. We're set. Okay, so, but what happens is if you don't have any sensory experience coming in, what happens to the motor programs? Well, it's not that they don't know what to do, is you stop sending motor signals. No sensory input, no motor signals. So all your muscles relax. He said it's like having the best massage you've ever had. So when you have a massage, they creep me out myself, but whatever. If you have a massage, the massage person will find where tight spots are, and they dig at them and loosen up those tight spots. And how do you feel afterwards for about an hour? You feel so relaxed until all the stresses in the way you're standing and everything else slowly tighten everything back up. Or you practice loud chain. But what happens is by going through the sensory deprivation chamber, you cut the feedback off of here. This is the key thing that we need to remember for this whole class. It's all about feedback. The brain works by feedback. Because our brain works, what does feedback mean? So I'm going to write this up in a little scheme here. So what we have is we have sensation. Causes movement. Movement causes sensation. So the sensation alters the movement, which alters the sensation. Well, it actually makes perfect sense because the original psychological investigators, the first people that were trying to, Wilhelm Wundt and the structuralists, were trying to analyze sensation and perception because they believed that sensation was the key to understanding the mind. And they're not that far off. What's funny is that the structuralists, Wilhelm Wundt and Titchener and all the original guys that studied the structure of the mind, really were physiological psychologists. They were all this class. They just didn't have the science yet. But the more we have the science, we start to realize that our brain is a feedback machine. What else is in? There's something else in this loop. Why is it called feedback, by the way? The movement is given to the thing that causes the movement. Sensation causes the movement. So movement causes sensation, which causes the movement, which causes sensation. It feeds back on itself. But there's something else in here. Oh, that didn't work. The software. So I've skied my entire life. I've been on the snow a bunch of times. It's just been something that we've done ever since I was 2 years old. Every day after school, in high school, we went skiing in the wintertime. That was just what we did. And so do I have the software to understand how snow feels? Yes. I understand what it's like to go play in the snow. My daughter, however, doesn't have the software to understand what the snow is. Even though she's been snowboarding for 3 years now, sort of. First year she broke her wrist and couldn't snowboard the rest of the time. But whatever. But so she's been snowboarding quite a bit, but how come she's pissed at me that I'm better than she is now? She's been doing it longer, so she thinks that I just picked it up and I'm better than she is. It's not that I've picked it up and I'm better than she is, it's just I've been around snow so much, do I understand the concept of snowboarding? By understanding the concept, does that help me change my feedback circuit? Now, by understanding how something works, this is really annoying, you change the way the sensation and perception is. You change the sensation and perception. By changing the mind, you can change the movement through altering how you perceive things. Craziness, man. So, our whole brain works as a giant feedback circuit. So in the last few minutes here, I'm trying to think of any other parts that we didn't cover that you need to know. Did I talk about the corpus callosum? That's here. Corpus callosum, it's the part that connects the two hemispheres together. We'll talk about it. There's a whole chapter on lateralization and hemisphericity. I'm going to make you try to listen to a podcast on it. It's amazing. It was just on a podcast called The Hidden Brain this last weekend. It's amazing. Anyway. But the corpus callosum connects the two hemispheres together, left and right side. Do we live in one side or the other side? No, we live in both. No, we integrate them both. It's whether the influence of one over the other is a change. So, as we look down, both hemispheres are completely separate. There's a really horrible TV show called Real Stories of the ER. Oh, hate that show. My wife loves it. She's like, oh, this is a great one. Ugh. Try to have it blocked so she doesn't watch it. But there's a kid where the brother shot him in the forehead with a crossbow. Anybody see that one? The arrow was sticking out, like, not through the skin, but just poking out in the back, and the little feathers were sticking out in the front of his. And yeah, like the little feather parts were here, and then you could see the skin stretched out in the back. And it went right between the two hemispheres. Aside from possible meningitis, they took it out, and he was fine. Didn't touch his brain at all, because the two hemispheres are completely separate. If that was down about another 1/4 of an inch, it probably would have killed him, because it would have went right through either corpus callosum, and right inside the corpus callosum are the ventricles underneath it. And if you pierce those, then the fluid will start flowing throughout the entire brain. That could be extremely serious. Or if he damaged the thalamus. But it went right through here. The arrow went straight through here. Sorry, I hit the corpus callosum there. Wait. There we go. Okay. I like this. Okay. So, because it went right through there, it didn't affect his brain at all, other than having a brother that shot him in the forehead. He's fine. Okay? So the same thing, anybody see the one with the knife? You saw the knife sticking right at the top of the guy's head. And he's talking and everything else, and so somebody just went stab, and it stuck there, and the blade went right in between the hemispheres. Because the brain itself moves around inside your skull. It's not attached to your skull for this probably very reason. If it was permanently stuck there, that would be bad. Okay. There's more to go. Did we talk about the hypothalamus? Yeah, so make sure what does it do? Hormones and drives. Thalamus, easy. Colliculi, check. Where's the brainstem picture? I forgot one that was really funny to me, but... Wait, one more. It's totally not worth it at this point, but... On the front of the brain, on the brainstem, these two little things right here, I'll draw an arrow. Those are called mammillary bodies. Anybody know why? They look like boobs. So the researchers call them mammillary bodies. They have nothing to do with anything to do with mammals, but that's what researchers call them.
I thought that, but I didn't want that to be true.
Yeah. Yeah.